Hey guys, Archetype of the Beyond here, and today we have a personal trip report coming from myself. This trip report took place over the summer of 2019. It was with me and a friend where we walked outside in the surrounding neighborhoods and just overall explored the area. It started off at 2:30 p.m. Our original dose was 2.2 grams, but then 2 hours in we decided to up it by zero point 0.5 grams, and then again 2 hours and 30 minutes in we decided to up it by roughly 1.5 grams each. This kind of got out of track really fast, but in a good way, in a really psychedelic way. And because it was with a friend, it was a lot more profound, and I really hope you enjoy. I'll be seeing you on the other side. This was my second time trying psilocybin mushrooms and my second time altogether. I still wanted to be precautious, however, after a while, caution was thrown out of the window, and I found myself lost in the infinite ocean of the psychedelic experience for the first time in my life. The only characters in the story are me and my friend Richie. Richie had previously sworn against the psychedelic experience, only to have curiosity get the best of him. We had no trip sitter for this experience, deciding we were responsible enough. We had walked to a park near Richie's house where we ingested the mushrooms alongside a peanut butter sandwich, as I had done previously. We then began to explore the area around the park, including a nearby forest. We had found the forest to be too dense and abandoned the operation. Still wanting to explore, we walked past a nearby apartment complex toward a linear trail. It was roughly 40 minutes since we first consumed the mushrooms and the first effects began to manifest. Oddly enough, it started off with an increased awareness of audio. I could hear the dirt and pebbles beneath my feet as we made our way down the trail. After making our way up a small hill, we decided to rest under a tree. A few visuals then became apparent. We found a small, sponge-like thing in the dirt near us. While I was holding it, I noticed the ability to perceive things in a truly three-dimensional sense. As I gazed into this sponge-like thing, the world around it seemed to fade out, and I could truly inspect this fascinating little object. We then walked back to the park and sat at a table. I had brought my speaker, and my friend began to play some music. As I looked at the sky, the sheer beauty of everything hidden behind our rigid view of the world began to unfold. The clouds seemed to dance magnificently across the sky, and each time I shifted my focus from an individual cloud to the sky in general, it seemed as though each moment was a painting made by none other than God Himself and was meant to be lived in. The trees beneath the sky began to reveal their complexity, as instead of seeing a breeze move all the leaves, it instead began to move each leaf individually, which then all moved as one. This is the one visual aspect of the trip which has persisted even after it was complete. None of this seemed like it was imagined or made up. Instead, it seemed like this had always been there and was simply waiting to be discovered. While I was having an excellent time, Richie couldn't help but feel underwhelmed. This was his first time, and he was hoping to genuinely trip out. He then said that he wanted to head back to his place where the mushrooms were and take more. Needless to say, I was hesitant. I had no preconceived notions about what this trip was going to bring, and in pure bliss, why would I risk it? However, after some talking, he convinced me. I planned on taking only a half gram more, while he wanted to take a full gram more. The walk back was amazing. Along the way, I was picking leaves from trees and observing the true intricacy of them. I had a stupid shit-eating grin glued to my face to the point where it actually began to hurt my jaw. I also had no desire to speak, even though I was totally clear-minded and was able to form a coherent thought and sentence. Once we got back to Richie's place, I told him that I could be cool around his family, who actually knew what we were doing, but I still didn't want to be annoying. We entered and they greeted us. They were watching The Hobbit on their big screen television. We said our hellos and I got some water while Richie got the rest of the shrooms, 4.3 grams just to be sure we had enough, you know? We then got our baggies, which were already pre-labeled and had our doses pre-measured. We then put the rest of the 3 grams into his truck. We stumbled across onto the patch of dead grass nestled between two huge houses and downed our respective doses. After a little while of waiting, I looked up at the sky. There was a cloud right above me, and it was self-transforming. This was amazing, as this was the first truly psychedelic visual I had ever had in my life. I then pointed this out to Richie, who shared my enjoyment. A thought suddenly took hold. "Richie," I said, "what if we did all of them?" We quickly made our way back to Richie's truck, grabbing what we needed before returning back to the dead grass. We continued to down the mushrooms. Suddenly a dog started barking at us, which was hilarious to me. Richie then began to act skittish. I thought he was afraid of the dog, but as he pointed out, some neighbors were actually watching us consume drugs. I found this to be even more hilarious. What if we were doing heroin and the neighbors just saw us bust out a huge syringe and a dirty spoon? Again, hilarious. We then stumbled away before finding a new place. This empty patch of land overlooked a golf course, and the little people looked like small ants. We then downed our baggies and continued to sit there. Richie then gasped. He told me it all hit him at once and began to bug out. On our way back, Richie kept talking, saying things like, "Okay, they've worn off for a little bit," before getting sucked back into the experience. He kept trying to grasp onto these small patches of sobriety, but it served only to worsen his experience. Eventually, I put my hand on his shoulder and told him to quote-unquote let go. From then on, the experience was nothing short from magical. We aimlessly wandered the new suburban gridlock we had discovered. Whenever the cars would stop passing by and we were left with silence, I had the most serene moment of consolidation in my life. We then stumbled across a dirt alleyway and began to sit there, listening to the silence. I then closed my eyes and experienced vivid closed-eye visuals. I let my hands glide across the warm dirt. It felt so soothing, so smooth. We then continued down the suburban gridlock. Eventually we found a leaf that had straight-up fractals on it. We then began to start picking leaves as we walked, observing every minute detail. Nature was absolutely breathtaking. As stated before, an extremely interesting effect is the feeling of 3 dimensions. Whenever I would focus my eyes onto something, say a tree, and walk around it, everything around it would fall out of focus, allowing me to focus on the tree as well as the space it occupied. Now almost everything I view while sober feels very flat and almost uninteresting. Eventually we laid down in a patch of grass and just stared at the sky. I find clouds amazing while sober, so needless to say, while under the state that we were in, they were absolutely one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. I watched the sky dance as the self-transforming clouds began to form fractals around their borders that would then permeate into the sky before fading away. Once I closed my eyes, it was like I was at a bird's eye view, looking at this moving interconnected web. We soaked all this in before continuing our adventure. Richie recommended I close my eyes and move around a little. Again, I got this sense of a 3-dimensional space surrounding me even though my eyes were closed. Every time I would stare into a bush or at grass, I noticed how thick the shrubbery actually was. I wanted to disobey all logic and dive headfirst into the grass, but I knew I couldn't. Also, whenever I would stare into a bush, I saw another interconnected web of being, which I found fascinating. Another thing worth noting was the overall message of the trip, which was the universe just is. Whenever we had a revelation, we were able to bring it back to this one statement, and I personally find it to be the most profound statement I had ever come across. On the surface it seems pretty obvious. However, once you dive a little deeper into it, that's when it gets interesting. And as a side note, I will bring that up at the end. I have created some notes towards the end that I will bring back at the end of this video, so just wait. Basically, everything we think we know about the universe is a human construct. Good and bad mean nothing, as all meaning is inherently a human construct. Everything we think we know and see is nothing more than a comprehensible hallucination. The mushrooms really made me realize how much we inherently put human meaning into everything, and with this drug, one is allowed to peel back the layers of meaning where the universe actually lies. Along the way we found a dead beetle, where we observed its shiny exoskeleton. It was pretty beautiful, and once we broke it apart we had a good laugh. After this, we made our long walk to a Mexican place, where we ate dope food and watched Twilight. After we left, around 9:30, the effects were almost completely gone, minus some emotion enhancement. We then decided to have a rest on a bus bench. Suddenly, we saw 2 people running through traffic with large boxes in each hand. Thinking I was watching a robbery, I got a little anxious, but watched. They ran up to where we were sitting and spoke in Spanish to each other. I thought I was going to get stabbed, when suddenly a bus pulled up and they got in. I then laughed it off, realizing that they were just wanting to get the bus before it left. The bus driver offered to give us a ride, saying in his thick Middle Eastern accent, I can give you a ride, no charge. We respectfully denied, but I remember thinking about how nice of a person this total stranger was. We then made our way to Richie's house before fading into sleep. Overall, this experience had a lot to offer and remains the most life changing experience of my life. Who knows though, it could be topped later down the line as I go deeper down the psychedelic rabbit hole. And here are the notes as promised. I now consider the meaning of truth as a human idea as well. I do not believe truth or reality is perceivable by anyone except possibly God themselves, and by extension, I do not believe this psychedelic experience gives you a sense of true reality, as I believe the universe is infinite and therefore has infinite ways to interpret and perceive it. I view the psychedelic experience as no more or less real than the sober experience. It is simply a different one. However, in that different perception of reality, new things that have not been there do begin to appear, and can become legitimately viewed. These are things that can be viewed by multiple people and are not unique to each person's psyche, and include things such as fractals and the self-transforming nature of reality and interconnection. There may also be more, but if you have done mushrooms, you know what I am talking about. Overall, what I'm trying to get at is that these tryptamine compounds via their replacement of neurotransmitters allow for new information about the universe to penetrate our mind, yet this information is no more or less real than our culturally sanctioned hallucination that we call sober reality, and they are most likely distorted by our mind as well, just as sober reality distorts the world around us.